From Keene in the Shire, the Liberty Media capital of the world, this is Daryl W. Perry, host of FPP Radio News for Wednesday, January 13th, 2016. Silver is trading at $13.84 per ounce. Gold is valued at $1,184 per ounce. And according to BitcoinAverage.com, the average price of Bitcoin is $431. Antiwar.com reports Pentagon officials on Tuesday were touting a great victory as the Philippines Supreme Court voted 10-4 to approve a deal that will allow the return of U.S. troops and weapons to military bases inside the Philippines. The ruling was related to a 2014 deal on the return of U.S. forces, which had been challenged in court. The agreement was related to territorial disputes between the Philippines and China in the South China Sea, with the Filipino government hoping to use U.S. military force to enforce their claim. Already, Filipino military officials are calling for U.S. deployments to the contested islands, citing flashing flights from China as a military challenge. The Philippines has a long and rather ugly history as a U.S. colony, which saw U.S. military forces killing massive numbers of civilians around the start of the 20th century. The Philippines finally voted to expel U.S. forces in 1991, but struggled with the U.S. desire to remain. Under the 2014 deal, no troops can be permanently stationed in the Philippines, though it is vague on how many troops the U.S. can deploy on a non-permanent basis, with analysts expecting several thousand U.S. forces to arrive.
If you're fed up with the government running every aspect of your life, but you're not listening to the Lava Flow podcast yet, what's wrong with you? Go right now to thelavaflow.com/listen. The Lava Flow podcast, channeling the flow of information to the libertarian, anarcho-capitalist, voluntarist, and agorist community. Subscribe today using any podcatcher at thelavaflow.com/listen, or just go back to sucking up to the government. The Lava Flow podcast, striking the root every episode.
UPI reports a U.S. federal appeals court tossed out a conviction of a veteran who wore unearned military decorations, saying it was a form of free speech protected under the U.S. Constitution. The San Francisco-based 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals made the ruling on Monday in the case of United States of America v. Elvin Joe Swisher. In 2007, Swisher was convicted of violating the Stolen Valor Act, a measure outlawing false claims of military accomplishment. The law was signed by former President George W. Bush in 2006, but the U.S. Supreme Court struck it down in 2012 as a violation of the First Amendment. President Barack Obama signed a new measure in 2013, making it a crime to lie about military service for financial gain, but Congress later removed a provision making it illegal to wear unearned medals.
For nearly 40 years, Roberts & Roberts Brokerage has been a trusted source for buying and selling precious metals like gold and silver. They also take Bitcoin for precious metal purchases and have permanently removed the minimum purchase amount for all orders paid in the digital currency. Call Roberts & Roberts today for knowledgeable advice on buying and selling precious metals and a forward-thinking approach to new technologies. 800-874-9760 or visit online at rrbi.co.
Reuters reports the U.S. Supreme Court ruled on Tuesday that Florida's death penalty sentencing process violates the constitutional rights of criminal defendants by granting judges powers that juries should wield. The court's 8-1 decision means death row inmate Timothy Hurst could be resentenced for the 1998 murder of Cynthia Harrison in Pensacola, potentially avoiding capital punishment. The case will return to the Florida Supreme Court to determine whether the death sentence for Hurst can be upheld on other grounds. Justice Sonia Sotomayor, writing on behalf of the court, said the right to an impartial jury guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution's Sixth Amendment required Florida to base Timothy Hurst's death sentence on a jury verdict and not a judge's fact-finding. Conservative Justice Samuel Alito was the sole dissenter. The court faulted Florida's system for allowing judges, and not juries, to find aggravating factors that determine whether a defendant is eligible for execution. A jury, by a 7-5 vote, had recommended to the judge that Hurst be executed, but did not specify what aggravating factors it had found. The judge then sentenced Hurst to death after concluding, independent of the jury, that 2 aggravating factors applied: that Hurst committed the murder while committing a robbery, and that the crime was particularly heinous. The U.S. Supreme Court case did not touch upon the bigger and more divisive question of the constitutionality of the death penalty. This has been FPP Radio News, online at fppradio.com.